Good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon, and a lot of producers are thinking about top dressing this time of year. And Brian, is this the best time to be doing it?
Normally this is the time of the year you'd want to be top dressing, at least making your top dress plans. This year it's a tough year when some of the considerations, you start thinking about what's going on. First we look at what happened at pre-plant this year. There's a lot of people that held off nitrogen application just due to fertilizer price and grain price. And so typically this time of year we'd be seeing a lot of top dressing happening. But a big part of the state right now is a little bit moisture limited. And so the question begs, do you pull the trigger or do you not? And I have to look at this in two different aspects. First, how's your soil moisture? We do have some of the state that has some decent rains and decent soil moisture. And so the answer is, if you've got good soil moisture now and you don't have nitrogen on yet, you definitely need to be making that decision and pulling that trigger. And at minimum, even if you're going to be short on nitrogen or wanting to limit your inputs, you need 40 to 60 pounds of nitrogen on right now, based upon your yield goal, if you have good soil moisture. Of course, we would like it in front of a rain. Even if you have good soil moisture, you want that nitrogen to be applied in front of a rain or snow event to make sure you get good infiltration into the soil and good root uptake. However, on the dry side, as we start moving into the areas that are a little bit drier, you have to look at it as, are you going to be conservative on the yield side or the input side? Right here in Stillwater and around our area, we have very little soil moisture. And so if I'm going to be conservative on the yield, I still want to put out 40 or 60 pounds of nitrogen while I have this cold spell and in front of some kind of rain event. If I want to be conservative on inputs and my cost going into that field and waiting out, then I may pre-buy if the price is right. But hold on to it until we get soil moisture again and move into the spring. Right now we have time to make that decision. We still have a month or two before it really gets tight on our window of application. So there's a chance if we get rain, you still get an opportunity to get on top of that field.
What's kind of the end deadline on putting down nitrogen?
The end deadline is going to be a little bit dependent upon your end game.
Right.
Is it grain only? I would like to see nitrogen down before hollow stem. We have some good research that shows that if it's responsive, you can go past hollow stem, but you don't want to go much past hollow stem. If it's grazed and you're going for graze out, then it's really about any time that the cattle alarm you see the response. And I'll go back to the standby is the enriched strip. Anytime that enriched strip shows up is when you want to be getting out there. And we've had enriched strip show up in November this year, and we've got some that I expect to start showing up in the next 30 to 45 days. And so that strip being responsive or different than the rest of the field is a good indicator. It's time, and we can go after hollow stem. I just prefer to be up in front of that.
Now, Kim Anderson always says, produce the best crop we can, but nitrogen is going to play a role in that. How do you justify putting down nitrogen for a crop that you may not get a full return on?
That's a tough one, and it's that balance. And our yield is limited by the most limiting component, and it's either going to be nitrogen or water. And so what part of the state you're in right now is that determining factor. Are you in the southwest where they got some decent rainfall and have some good soil moisture? Nitrogen your limiting factor, and you want to get as much on as you can afford to get to that yield level you're expecting. In the water limited area right now, especially Payne County and the surrounding areas, water is our limiting factor, not nitrogen. But as soon as we get rain, if we get spring rains, that's going to transition. So we need to be ready to get nitrogen on when we get those spring rains.
Okay, thank you much, Brian. And now with an update on the canola crop, here's Josh Lofton.
Well, as far as the canola crop around the state, we pretty much look like this. The really heavy freezes have really done a number on it. It's really taken a toll on the above ground portion, which is what we see here. See a lot of brown material. We've heard a lot of growers call and say we're starting to smell the canola. What's wrong with it? Is it going to make it? And that's what we're going to see when we get those really flash, really heavy frosts or freezes, is we're going to get a lot of death of this above ground tissue. If you have a good below ground portion to this crop, you're gonna do better in the winter than if you were to have just a lot of above ground but not a whole lot of root. So the good thing is we had such good fall temperatures, we had good fall moisture, that we got some really good root growth. And this crop is surviving because of that root growth we got. And we see that a crop here, this was a canola crop that was planted in mid-August. So this is probably one of the first canola planted in the state. And we see that it had this tremendous above ground portion. That's all gone, but what we always like to see, that growth point is really tucked up really close to that soil surface. Even though it's in no-till, the residue is kind of compacted down because of that moisture and that rainfall. It's really done nicely to keep that crown really close to the soil surface, which is what we like to see, and that's what we're seeing across the state pretty much right now. We have something here, and it's a above ground portion of something we picked up out of this one. We see a lot of this material is gone. We even see some of the smaller leaves that you know are typically tucked down deep into this growth point. The tips of them have been seared off, and they're all gone. But once again, the bread and butter, or where you look at, is the crown. And if you look here, it's still fleshy. It's got a lot of moisture to it. The above and below ground looks really good. If you look at something that was planted 3 weeks later, we still see, I mean, this was taken not but a quarter mile from here, and we still see that the frost got it, but because all of its vegetative tissue is kind of tucked down in here, we see a lot of green material still. And this is what it'll look like if growers planted 1st of October, middle of October. This is what you're gonna see. If you planted real early and you got a lot of above ground growth, this is kind of what you're going to see. Talked to a grower this morning. He started to have a little bolting. So that canola plant going from vegetative to reproductive, that's a concern because once you do that, that growth point has been elevated. But for everybody else that kind of looks like this, if you haven't kind of gone through that stage, everybody else probably should look like this. It's probably going to be okay. All you got to do is take your shovel. For some folks, because it's so dry, that shovel is going to be a little bit tough to get down in the ground. Take the shovel, get the crown out, take your pocket knife, cut it open. You'll see that a majority of plants are still doing really well. Canola College is coming up really early this year. It's a great event for growers. If you're able to, I highly recommend going Canola College the January 19th. It doesn't cost anything. Come on out. We'll be glad to get you signed up. But if you can, go ahead and register early and make sure to attend the event. It's going to be a good one.
As we get ever closer to the spring calving season, it's time to think about how we can best save the most number of calves out of our cow herd this year. One of the ways, of course, is to provide assistance to those cows, or especially young heifers that might need some help. And that would be a whole lot easier if these cattle would have a high percentage of them calving during daylight hours. Well, there is a method that can be used that seems to encourage a higher percentage of the cattle to calve between, say, 6 a.m. in the morning and 6 p.m. in the evening. It's called the Conofel method, named after a rancher in Canada that back in the 70s discovered that if he changed the feeding time of his herd, that he seemed to encourage a higher percentage of calves to come in daylight hours. Research has been done extensively on this subject and tends to bear out what old Gus Conofel found out in Canada back in the 1970s. Most recently, some data comes from the Kansas State Experiment Station at Fort Hays up in northwest Kansas. They kept track of that herd over a 5-year period of time. And what they did was feed the sorghum hay every evening right around dusk. And they kept track of the calving pattern of those cows over that 5-year period of time. What they found was that when they did that, it looked like about 34% of the calves came in the 4-hour period between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. Another 21.2% came between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then another nearly 30% of the calves were actually arrived between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. That left only 15% of the calves that were delivered between 6 p.m. in the evening and 6 a.m. the following morning. That seems to reiterate some of the other research that's been done around the country that suggests that if we can move the feeding to evening, that we'll get a high percentage of these cows that calve during daylight hours. One of the questions that'll always come up, well, I put out big round bales where the cows have access to it 24/7. What happens if we just change the supplement feeding to around dusk or 5 o'clock in the evening? Research here at Oklahoma State tended to show that it had a similar effect, perhaps not as dramatic. We had a record of about 70% of the cows calving between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. when we changed the supplement feeding from earlier in the day until about 5 o'clock in the evening. What some ranchers tell me is that they have had success by controlling when the cows have access to the big round bales. In other words, they put the big round bales in the bale feeder behind a fence and then open the gate to that particular pasture in the early evening hours, and then the following morning run the cows back out of that area into their normal pasture grazing area until the following evening. And they have reported good success in terms of having a high percentage of the calves coming in daylight hours. It certainly looks like this method tends to work, will help us get a higher percentage of calves coming when we're likely to give them some assistance and have a little better survival rate from that particular calf crop. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, is here now. And Kim, let's jump right in with prices and this bump that we're talking about.
Well, since Christmas, we've got about 25-30 cent price increase. We got a nickel increase in the basis this week. I think that's good. That shows, I think, demand's still strong. And we've had a 25-30 cent increase in that March futures contract. Our cash prices are in Oklahoma now are mostly in the $3.20 to $3.40 range, and that's a whole lot better than that $2.60 to $2.80 we had in late fall and early winter.
I love this good news and this rally. What could cause prices to go up a little bit more or start to decline again?
Well, the next thing coming down the pike is the USDA supply and demand report. That comes out the 12th of this month. We've essentially completed our 2016-17 world wheat crop. Our next harvest will be India, Pakistan, North Africa, that part of the world. That'll start in March, April, and May. You've got the dollar index. It peaked out at 103, backed off a little bit this week, but it's still relatively high. That's impacting our prices. The United States, the Texas Oklahoma wheat crop, the hard red winter wheat crop, will be the next world wheat crop to be harvested and for export. And so the world's going to be watching our crop conditions. They're not as good as they were last year. That report came out this week, and the conditions are worse than last year. That's positive price-wise. The world doesn't need any more wheat. We got adequate amounts of wheat. What the world needs is quality, and that quality is going to be a big determination of our price.
And then what do you think could happen long term?
Well, I think for the next couple of weeks, until we get into the March, April, May time period, I think wheat prices are just going to waller around. I can't see them backing up very much as long as we maintain this export demand. I'm looking right now at harvest with a good quality, test weight, and protein. I think we could have $4.25 wheat in June.
Okay, Kim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week. And now a word from our Extension Cotton Specialist, Randy Bowman, about the upcoming Red River Crops Conference.
We have what we feel is a really good program coming up with our colleagues from the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and our folks with Oklahoma Cooperative Extension. We have been planning this now for several months, but that particular meeting is going to be January 24th and 25th. We cover so much material in that particular conference that we feel that we need 2 days to do it. And one is a full day on cotton that we will have speakers from the Texas A&M system as well as from our system there covering that. And also on what we refer to as the Other Crops Day on the 25th, we will have some updates on canola production, grain sorghum, forage sorghum, and pasture management, and I believe some cover cropping issues will be covered. And this year's conference, we will be in Childress, Texas at the brand spanking new event center there. We're going to have some speakers from the A&M system like Jason Woodward, Dr. Jason Woodward here from the Texas A&M Center at Lubbock, and he's going to be talking about, he's a pathologist, a plant pathologist, he's going to be talking about this bacterial blight problem that we more or less continue to see flaring up in areas across the cotton belt, and certainly we got a really significant dose of this year.
For more information about the upcoming Red River Crops Conference, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Oklahoma's temperatures have really been swinging lately. One of the impacts from that is more winter cold damage on plants than we have seen for a number of years. Wheat plants near Chickasha showed definite damage to upper leaves on Wednesday. Tillers and leaves down near the ground still had good, healthy green color. Along with the cold, our lack of moisture has added to plant injury. A map of rainfall from the system that went through early Monday morning showed only a few locations received more than a half-inch of rain. Pauls Valley, Ringling, Medill, Mount Hermon, Broken Bow, and Idabel. On a percent of plant available water map from Wednesday, the top 16 inches of soil had good moisture in the green areas. Yellow areas had under half the amount of plant available water the soils could hold. Brown areas had less than 20% of soil water available for plants. What adds to concerns about dryness is that these soil moisture measurements are based on soils at the Mesonet sites under dormant grasses. Nearby fields with growing wheat and canola are going to be drier. Let's hope we get some slower soaking rainfall soon across the state. Here's Gary with more on our expanding drought.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2017. It's been really cold lately. You may have gotten a little bit of snow, but if you have drought, it probably didn't help very much. So let's get straight to the newest drought monitor map and see what we have. Well, the new map is just as ugly as the last one, if not a little bit uglier. We see that severe to extreme drought starting to spread even more. We have more of that extreme, or the red color, that's the D3 down across southeastern Oklahoma. And then that darker brownish color, that's the severe drought, and that extends now all the way from southeastern Oklahoma through the western Oklahoma panhandle. So that severe to extreme drought is starting to increase, and around that area we see an increase in the moderate drought. This is the departure from normal rainfall map for 2016. As we can see, much of central all the way through eastern Oklahoma, anywhere from 3 to more than 12 inches below normal, and that also extends up into northwestern Oklahoma. The best place with for moisture in the state was southwestern Oklahoma. Now, the departure from normal temperature map, as you can see, again, our third warmest year on record for the state of Oklahoma behind 2012 and 1954. So not a good record to have, but you can see it was warm all over. A very warm first 4 or 5 months of the year, and then a very warm last 4 or 5 months of the year. That's what really did it, and that's what helped that drought to accelerate as we got into fall, into early winter. Now, the latest U.S. monthly drought outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, unfortunately, we see no improvements through the end of January, at least according to their outlook, but we do see some possible development up in north central Oklahoma and also out in the western panhandle. So we're entering 2017 and a little bit of trouble with drought. Hopefully we can start to get more storm systems in here and start to knock a little bit of it out before springtime, when we hope for some really good precipitation. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
In the winter, you may not think of bees and wasps, but this is a great time of year to learn about them. Here's Eric Rebeck.
Bees and wasps are both beneficial and serve as pests. Ecologically speaking, they're beneficial from the standpoint that, especially with bees, they're pollinators, so they're useful in the reproduction of plants. In particular, are agriculturally important or horticulturally important plants. They also can serve as pests in the standpoint that they can sting. They sting to defend themselves. When they're defending themselves, they're either in harm's way or they're trying to defend their nest. Wasps can serve as pollinators, but they're more important in terms of their predatory role in the environment. So they're this time of year they're eating a lot of caterpillar pests that you might find in your garden or your field. They can also serve in another important role as parasitic insects. So they're laying their eggs in or on a pest insect. So we have this kind of dichotomy. They're either predatory or they're parasitic. But of course, like the bees, wasps can also be nuisance pests in the sense that they will sting you. So bees and wasps typically are pests in the summertime when there's plentiful food sources around, nectar and pollen from flowers, pest insects that they might be trying to use as a food source. And they can be active through the fall months as well, until it gets cold enough that they just can't be active anymore. There's no food sources available, so they themselves, again, those overwintering queens will get ready to bed down, so to speak, and hibernate and carry on that species or that colony the next season. So the rest of the colony will die off. Really, when it comes to the biology of these critters, the most important members are those that are reproductive, because they're the ones that are going to carry on the species later on. These are largely social insects, so they have division of labor associated with them. So the vast majority of what you see flying around are the workers. That's the worker caste. And they're out there collecting the food, defending the nest. If they're in the hive or the nest, they're tending to the eggs and the larvae that are developing. But it's really those queens that are the most important, because they're the ones that will contribute their genes and start that colony the next year.
One of the things that we got to think about, and one thing that we live with here in Oklahoma, is wildfire. And wildfires can occur pretty much any time of year, but the biggest majority of our wildfires that we have in Oklahoma typically run from around November till March, the winter time, when fuels are dormant, vegetation is dormant, and we get a lot of drier humidities and things, and that's when we get a lot of the big wildfires, is typically during those winter months. And so coming into the winter, there's things that we should think about on how we might want to protect our home and protect some of the things on our property from wildfire damage. Several things that we can do to protect our house, the best that we can from wildfire. One of them is to make sure we mow that lawn there at the end, get it really short, keep the grass down around it real short, keep grass around our home and stuff short, as far out as we can get it. Also, again, if you have a lot of trees, hardwood trees that drop their leaves, make sure you go ahead and rake those things up, remove those. Don't let them build up around the house or underneath the house, underneath your deck or things like that, where fire and embers can get in and cause that kind of damage. Because the thing we need to remember is most home damage that occurs with wildfires typically occurs after the fire front passes by the house. It's from smoldering embers and stuff that are landed in flammable materials around a house that start the fire. One of the most obvious things is if you have a fireplace, wood burning stove, and you stack wood up on your house. Don't stack it. It's very convenient to have it stacked on the back porch by the door, but think about if embers get in that can cause a fire. Another thing that we should consider is in areas where we live, where there's a lot of trees and stuff around our home, is to make sure we have stuff cleaned up around it. We prune those trees up where we don't have vegetation and stuff, limbs all the way down to the ground. Also in areas where you have a lot of eastern red cedar, you want to get those back away from the house, cut those things down, get them totally removed so they're not a fuel hazard. Kind of like this setting that we're at here, these folks had a concern about their house being so close to this area here with a lot of trees, and historically it had a lot of cedar trees growing up in it. They come back in here, remove the cedar trees, open it up. If any kind of fire comes through here, it's going to stay on the ground. It's not going to be a crown fire, a big hot fire coming up against their house. Be easier to put out and easier to protect that home. Again, thinking about removing the vegetation, picking up around the house, making sure everything's clean. That way you can protect your house. It'll be easier for a fire department to come to protect your house in case of an emergency like that in a wildfire. You know, less flammable stuff that you have around it, the better off you're going to be.
Well, that does it for us this week on SUNUP. If there was something on the show that you'd like to learn more about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and while you're there, check out our social media. I'm Dave Deacon, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.